Thank you for joining us for Real Talk, as we seek to have conversations about things that are important to real life and things that we believe that the church should have a voice on. So thank you for joining us. Let's see how this went.
Okay, everybody, we want to do a Real Talk conversation tonight about substance abuse. Justin Franich was with us on Sunday and spoke from his own personal background of struggling with substance abuse.
So good.
Your testimony was powerful.
Loved it.
Yeah,
So
people
good.
really loved it. And we just want to hear more from you guys tonight on substance abuse and kind of a little, if we rewind a little bit back into your history of how you came through it and are now on the other side of it and you're clean. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a struggle, as I shared on Sunday, I had a struggle with drug and alcohol addiction for about 5 years of my life. Particularly meth was my drug of choice. I spent 5 years of my life as a crystal meth addict, and being somebody that grew up in the church, that grew up with good Christian influences, and ended up making poor choices and slipping into drug addiction. It almost took my life. And thank God for a family that cared enough to do an intervention and step in and show a little tough love in the middle of my addiction and help me realize that I needed to get help, that I needed to change my life, that I couldn't continue in meth addiction, and found my way to a program called Teen Challenge, and that's where I met Jesus. And Jesus was the main reason, or the only reason, that I was able to break free from meth addiction.
I like the way you, when they did the intervention, that they shut doors. I think that was very important because you said you were good at manipulating. You could go to friends and family and manipulate. I like, that I think was a major part.
Yeah, it was.
That's something that happens, right, as drug addicts. Like, we become master manipulators.
Right. Yes,
We're
been there.
really good at spinning stories in order to make our own junk not look as bad.
So that was a real good thing to point up in case anybody ever wants to do an intervention. Make sure you shut all those doors.
Yeah.
And all your family were together. That's what you're saying.
Yeah,
They're unified.
there was a unity. Yeah, so mom and dad knew that if they sent me out, that I could call grandma or I could call my aunt and uncle or whoever that might be. And so by closing all those doors and coming up with a plan as a family, they were all on the same page, and it was it's much easier for me to go to where I needed to go, which is Teen Challenge, rather than manipulating another family member, because that's part of the addiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were 4 stages of the addiction that you talked about on Sunday that I just want you to highlight again that I thought were so good for all the listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's experimentation. That's the beginning, right? I'm curious. The Bible says sin's pleasurable for a season.
Yeah.
So is drug addiction. I mean, people don't use drugs because it's painful. I mean, there's some fun in it at the beginning, and so they're experimenting, kind of playing around with it, and then that leads to like a regular use, whether that become. I grew up in a college town, and so regular use in the college town that I lived in was every single weekend. You would hear the music going at the neighbor's house, and you'd see the cases of beer, or this college student smoking marijuana every single week.
Wow.
And then it progresses from there to what we call risky use. And the risky use is where life starts to erode a little bit. You can't manage life anymore. You're not as functioning of an addict, and then the last step is that dependency, and that's where you're using to feel normal. That's where drug addiction has become the new normal, and you have to use just to get back to normal again. And that's where it really begins to get dangerous.
Okay.
Yeah, it really does. Those 4 stages were great. They really hit home with people on Sunday. And because you guys have helped a lot of people through this as well, both Justin and Ash.
I think a good question is, when do you get help for someone? If you see them in the stages, when is a good time to say, hey, I recognize a problem here and we need to step in and help?
Yeah.
When would you say?
I think my opinion is like I think there can be conversations at stage 2, when you're starting to see regular use. But I think when it gets to that point where it starts to erode the life, because if I'm using and I'm not really feeling an impact on my life, there's not going to really be any motivation to get help. I don't really see the need for it.
Gotcha.
But when you kind of slip into that stage 3 and it's risky, the only thing that blows this whole conversation up, though, with these stages of addiction is heroin and fentanyl. Like experimentation
Right.
is deadly. You know,
Yeah.
so we go back to what the '80s where there used to be these not even once, just say no, and people are like, well, that's all outdated. But like heroin it's that like
Yeah.
one time you could die.
Wow.
And so you talk about these stages of addiction and how do you introduce that into a conversation where fentanyl, even a trace amount, is killing people. And so I think the conversation has to be tailored based off of what the individual is using. And people need to be educated that heroin it's deadly. There's no progressing through this. It can be one time and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was kind of the conversation for me and my family. We didn't know my cousin who was in his early 30s. We knew something was going on, but we didn't know exactly what was going on with him. And we're coming up actually on 2 years of his death, but it was, literally one moment he was here with us and the next moment he wasn't. And it came out that it was fentanyl. It killed him. And, he left behind a son and a lot of other people who loved him. But it was one of those things, like we didn't always see the signs. We knew something was going on, but we didn't really know that that's what it was. And like you said, it literally took one time of him. We knew he was using more, but it was just that one bad dose that just took his life.
Well, and people don't realize marijuana has become such an issue, okay? But they're putting fentanyl in marijuana. It's killing people, and people aren't realizing it. Oh, it doesn't hurt you. Okay, you get a bad batch, or you buy it from somebody you don't know, you're dead. I mean, it's not.
Right.
Yeah. You said that marijuana is now legal in 30 states, and that's kind of a topic where I hear as Christians, well, if it's legal, does that make it okay? And that can be, we're talking about medicinal marijuana use, we're talking about, and it's like, oh man, in the church, that can get a little bit, like, what do you do with that? And it's not black and white anymore. And so I loved what you said, that marijuana, 75% of addicts started with marijuana. That made me take a step back a little bit and think, wow, maybe it's not so okay after all. Right?
That was, our experience with the addicts that we worked with at Teen Challenge.
Okay, yeah.
Were 75% of them were standing on stage and would always begin their testimonies that, I started using marijuana first.
Yeah.
So the group that I worked with, and that was part of the story, it was part of my story.
Yeah.
That was the first thing that I used.
Right.
It was typically easiest to access,
Yeah.
Wow.
And with me, it led to
Yeah.
cocaine later on. I was in my 30s, but still, it was like, well, what does that do? Well, the person that I was doing the pot with, I trusted, so okay, well, you're not going to give me something that's going to hurt me.
Yeah.
And that led to the cocaine use, and that wasn't good either.
And I think a lot of times the marijuana use gets justified, and you'll hear addicts talking about it like, well, it's not killing people. You're not hearing people overdose on marijuana. And so it's like this justification, like, just continue to smoke pot. It's less dangerous than alcohol. There's all these justifications for using it, but like, you're not using it because you don't feel something. Like, there's a motivation for using it. And so as Christians, it's like, what's the motivation behind it? Why?
Yeah.
Like, why do I need to turn to that? It's just the same reason people would turn to the bottle.
Ooh, that's
Why do I
good.
need to turn,
Yeah.
or why do I feel the need to self-medicate in order to not feel normal?
Yeah.
What am I getting in that I'm not getting out of my relationship with Christ or in the Word of God
Good
that
point.
I need to fill in there?
Yeah. Yeah.
And do you think that people kind of turn to some of these things maybe too because it's like it's easier to like smoke that joint, it's easier to take another shot than it is to actually like begin to kind of that self-reflective process of like, okay, what's going on under the layers? Like, hey, let's peel these things back, because that process can be just as painful sometimes as,
Sure.
like they feel that like doing the drugs is going to be easier. Like somehow if I just numb it long enough, it's just going to go away.
Right.
But there's pain on either side of that. Like there's the pain where you could, hey, maybe you spend a few weeks diving into the issue, or I put myself on a lifelong track of like
substance abuse.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, Sunday, Pastor John was talking about that and the scope, right, of substances being more than just like heroin or cocaine, but like how we have our vices that we all turn to in order to avoid, like you said, peeling those layers back and dealing with those issues. I mean, it's painful. And I think a lot of times that's why people avoid the Word of God, because it's a mirror. And the mirror reveals who we really are. And so sometimes seeing who we are is challenging. Like we don't want to deal with childhood trauma or stuff that we may have dealt with in our past, or being abandoned or rejected or whatever that might look like. And so it's easier to get high. It's easier to take a shot and just say, you know what, I'm just going to push this aside. And that's why Paul says, right, don't be drunk with wine, but be filled with the Spirit. Because in that Spirit-filled life, you can begin to deal with those issues.
That's right.
I love that.
That's good.
It's that transformation.
Right. So the biggest motivator, I think you touched on it on Sunday, is the hitting of rock bottom. I mean, I'm sure it takes a long time for some to get there. But is that one of the biggest motivators?
It can be, yeah. I think when things start to fall apart, you know, in the world that you've been living in. I mean, has anybody else seen somebody hit rock bottom? Have you?
I've been rock bottom.
Yeah.
Maybe not so much as others. You know, I think we all have different stages, different areas where we hit rock bottom. With me, I was just basically losing friends. I was drinking my husband under the table. I was miserable. I was tired of things not getting any better. I was tired of running around in circles. I was ashamed. You know, I couldn't go out of the house without being drunk. I couldn't go anywhere without being drunk. At work, you know, where I was working at, and they knew, or they would say, and I justified it. I would, oh well, I'm just, you know, it's just from the night before. It's from the night before, where actually it was an hour before I came to work. You know.
So what happened? Like, right, what caused you to realize that you needed to do something different? Like, was there an event, or was it like a series of events?
One, I had gotten a DUI, but before that I had gotten a drunk in public while my husband got a DUI. We were in jail together, knocking on the wall. We do everything together. And then, while he had to spend weekends in jail, so I was alone on the weekends and drinking even more. I got a DUI. And then the next door neighbor at the time was away. Her grandparents were babysitting. And I went over to play with the kids. But I was so drunk, I barely remember. I scared the little girl. And the neighbor, when she came home, told me if I wanted to be in her son's life, that I better never drink around him again, or she was going to knock the living, you know what, right out of me. And I woke up the next morning to go to church with my daughter, because my grandsons were in daycare at Abundant Life at that time. My other daughter was getting ready to have her baby, and I don't know, everything just clicked. It just clicked. I was tired of going around in circles. Pastor John was preaching that day on starting over. If you want to change your life and you're tired of your life going around in circles, you know, you have to change what you're doing. You have to look at yourself, see what you're doing, and you know, reach out. And it just, boom, whole new world. That week I gave my life back to Christ. I got baptized, I think, a little while later, and it just all came together. I find myself now on the path that God had for me all along. I look back, times when I should have been dead from a wreck that I should have been in, but somehow miraculously avoided. And I see God's hand. I see God's hand.
That's so much who Jesus is. Like,
right.
Like when we hit our
He is
bottom,
awesome.
like there's always that hand out. Like, hey, Sunday you go to church, a message on starting over.
Yeah.
Like, just God's
Oh,
voice
absolutely.
so clear at the end of rock bottom.
My
And I
mom
love
turned, I was a week sober at my mom's 90th birthday. This woman had prayed like you would not believe for me. And she's still alive. She's 94 now, but she was alive to see me come to Christ.
that. That's awesome.
You know, and many, many years she prayed. Many years. You know, but it's God's timing.
Yeah, that's right.
God's timing. But so, you know, now I've got breaking chains, and just I've got a family who loves me, who is happy and forgives me, and you know, just
That's awesome.
God's hand in everything. I mean, Everything. I see it, I look for it, I find it.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah.
What do you think some of the best things to do for those that are recovering? You know, they're in the midst of recovering. It doesn't happen quickly, you know? But what do you think the best practices are to continue to help encourage the addict in the recovery process? How can families come around that and friends?
I think recovery is discipleship, and I think that's one of the things I love so much about the ministry of Teen Challenge.
Yeah.
That it didn't separate the two. Like, it wasn't that I got off drugs and that was just the end of it. Like, I accepted Jesus, but like, in order to maintain my sobriety, there was this process of growing up as a disciple.
Yeah.
And so I think as family members, if we're looking at this from a Christian perspective and we want to step in and help our loved ones, really stay free, then we've got to encourage authentic discipleship.
Mm-hmm.
But like the Christian life is not boring. Like, when you're
Right.
really all in, like when you're really
Absolutely.
living the way Jesus called you to live,
It's exciting.
it's not a boring
exciting.
life.
Right.
But when we do religion, like just checking off boxes,
Yeah.
that's never going to satisfy for somebody who used to put drugs in their life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you put the two of those together? Like, and so it's got to be authentic discipleship, growing up in Jesus and really experiencing the fullness of what life is in Christ, what all of us experience. Like why do we show up? I mean, because of that relationship with Christ.
Yeah, I have to have God in my life every day. I mean, I wake up in the morning and you still have challenges. I mean, I was on vacation last week and I'm on the beach and I'm like, why can't I have a glass of wine? Why can't I have a beer? And God's telling me, because you can't handle it. You might get by with 1 or 2 days of 1 or 2, but eventually you're going to go back to that case. You're going to go back to 3 or 4 or 5, 6 bottles. You just, and it's keeping God with me firmly by my side in the Word all day long, every day.
I love where you talked about Paul and his struggle in Romans 7, and that kind of ties in with what you were just saying is, we're talking specifically about substance abuse today and right now, and on Sunday, that was the topic. But what I found astounding is, as you were talking, we could apply this to so much of our life. Really, any sin or any thing we struggle with, as Paul talked about his struggle, about having that thorn in the flesh, or why do I keep doing what I don't want to do, and kind of like but you had said, hey, we're all one decision away from really ruining the rest of our lives, or a downward spiral. And I thought that was so good how you said every one of us has to take a daily decision and a daily choice to make right choices and to stay away. And I love where you said, good for you, at the beach, and
Look, back
you made
in
a
December.
decision.
Back in December, I was so close to drinking, so close. Going through it, we put my mom in a nursing home, so going through my mom's stuff, going through my dad's things, and he'd been dead for 10 years. He's been gone for 10 years. But when he passed, I was a mess. I was drunk. I wasn't sober. So it was almost like reliving his death again, only doing it sober. But the worst part was, and I won't even go into that, but it was just some memories came up that shook me to the very core. And I went home and opened up the fridge, and I had a beer in my hand, but I put it back. God literally picked me up off the floor with his hands around me saying, you're okay, I've got you, you're okay. And I put it back. I didn't open it, but I mean, my husband still drinks a little, so it's always in my house, which I think helps me stay strong too. I wouldn't recommend it for others that have, trying to not drink, but you really definitely have to be strong in that area.
And that was in the line of, John, you asked the question, can you really be free? Can you really, my sister has been to Teen Challenge. I have an older sister, and she is doing amazing. She's clean, and I'm so proud of her. But she told me, and I verified it with her today, she told me that 15 of her classmates that went through Teen Challenge have now overdosed, and she's been to their funerals. And it's just heartbreaking, and it makes me so proud of her that she's been able to stay free and stay clean and stay whole. But it reminds us so much how this is, can they be free? Can people really live free? And your answer to that was just beautiful, that yes, they can. And so that kind of is where, so can you talk a little more about that?
Yeah,
How do we stay free?
I think we're all in recovery, like as Christians.
Yeah.
Like we've all got this sinful nature that we're constantly at war with. I mean, that's the tension of the Christian life, and Paul talks about it, where there is this battle of walking in the Spirit versus walking in the flesh.
Right.
Yeah.
And we got to make a decision, right? The Bible says, I think it's in Romans, if you live by the Spirit, you're going to die. But if you live by the Spirit, you'll bring forth life and peace. And so I think there's this just tension there of all of us as Christians. And I don't think it's any different for the average everyday Christian that never struggled with drug addiction versus those of us who struggle with addiction. We all have our pet sins that we struggle with. And so as we intentionally walk in the Spirit day by day, then we can remain free.
That's right.
The Christian life, like, really walked out, and drug addiction are completely incompatible. They don't layer on top of each other, like you just, like I don't see it. Like I don't see it in the scripture. Like I see that walking in the Spirit, and what I experienced as drug addiction, they're way different, opposite ends of the spectrum.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's good.
But you have a lot of people too that have anger is an addiction for them. Because I've got some people, in my class that are fighting with anger. We have with food, codependency. Wow, that's a big one. And then again, you've got some that's the reason they drink. That's the reason they do the drugs.
And you don't say that to levy accusations or judgment on other people, but more like it just levels the playing field. Like we're all struggling here together.
Exactly.
And so we can all help and lift each other up. Like this is a community.
Right.
And so when we're all struggling together, so let's just encourage and help build each other. And that's really the beauty of it.
And the thing too is we have to remember there's always a way out. If you're presented with a problem, God gives you a way out. Always.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I want to go back to something you talked about, Jeannie, because just talking with people a lot in the world we live in, we've all been there. We've seen people that have addictions, and then they come through them, and then they relapse, whatever you want to call it. But we live in the world where, hey, I'll do what I want to do, you do what you want to do. But we rarely go back and take a look at it and saying, hey, what I do really matters for other people around me, such as, we had a friend of ours that came out of alcoholism and was free, and he sat with a friend across the table. It could smell the wine, and one sip later he was back into his addiction. And we don't really realize the power of that many times in knowing who's across the table from us, that what we do really does matter, and we do not know what they've gone through. And like you said, it's just one decision away of spiraling out of control. So I think it's really important as we look at that, and that can go through many things, but I just use that as an example. Fortunately, he is now free, in years free, AA and many things, and them teaching and leading and helping other people. But it's very true, it's very powerful.
Yeah. On that note, I got a text from my sister today, and I just want to make sure my facts were straight before I shared them, but she said, just my input, the ladies and the staff that I'm still in touch with from Teen Challenge years ago commented this: the reason that they maintained their sobriety or stayed clean is because of their relationship with Jesus Christ. Without him, we all believe we would have not been successful.
Wow.
I mean, that's just huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
Because
Because it's daily choosing, and I love what you said for the addict. It's going to take a little more, probably in the lines of discipleship, and a little more coming around them and giving them something and purpose to live for. I love what you do, Jeannie, with the breaking chains, because that's what we're doing.
We were doing the spirits, the fruit of the Spirit. We did love, and there were so many things that you can pull out of that in the Bible. And this one little book that I had found that I was using, and I always ask, is this getting to you all? Is this boring? If it is, we can find something else. And it's funny the responses that I get. No, there's things in here that are really helping me that I didn't know. And that's just, I'm like, oh, okay, thank you, God, because, you know, I couldn't do it without him.
Yeah.
And I need him in my life every day. And I know that if I need that, there's others out there that do too. And that's why we started Breaking Chains.
Right.
It's coming up on September 16th, I believe. I should have brought my journal with me because I had it in there. But I think
Okay.
September 16th will make 4 years.
It's awesome.
Believe.
Congratulations.
Awesome.
That's amazing.
So,
This girl's
So good.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you were
Testimony.
telling me today, because something you said in your message about giving purpose to it, kind of filling
Yeah.
that void of vacancy of the drug or the alcohol or whatever the addiction is, and kind of turning it around and filling that with purpose. And I see that in you, Jeannie. Yeah.
I told her I had never thought of it until you spoke on it today. When I stopped using cocaine, I started drinking a lot. And then my father died and I started drinking even more. But when I decided to quit drinking, I could understand, I wasn't empty, but I felt I needed to do something, and that's when I dove into Jesus. And that's where I'm at now. I mean, that's my addiction. Anybody that knows me can testify to that. Yes, that's her addiction. I probably drive people crazy with it, you know. But
Yeah.
it is. I love it.
Yeah.
Virginia Beach, you know, I let my faith be bigger than my fear, and I went parasailing. Loved
great.
it. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I asked Jesus that morning on the beach. The next morning, I was like, put people in my path. Put people in my path today. And he did. Just all day long. People,
Yeah.
the stories I could tell. It's just amazing. It's just amazing
Awesome.
the way he works. And I love sharing every week. There's something that has happened to me during the week. So Monday night, you know, it's okay, what happened to you this time? Where's God's hand at this time? Because I'm just blurting it right out there.
Yeah.
Unbelievable the way he works.
So true. Yeah, we're talking about this wide range of substance abuse. It goes into eating. It can go into so many different layers, like we said. But I wonder, I've never done drugs to know, but you know, it's like anything else. I'm a sinner saved by God's grace. But what would somebody who's been a drug addict wants people around them to know while they're in it? What's the struggle? Because for the average person like me, I don't know what that means. I mean, what does that mean? What's going on in the mind of a drug addict?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Like, I know for me, when I was like, I wasn't satisfied, happy, like when I was an addict, but I didn't know how to express that. Like, and even as Pastor Ben touched on earlier, like I had a lot going on in me that I was trying to escape. Like, I wasn't comfortable in my identity. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. And so that like really became an out. And then like once I got hooked,
Yeah.
then it was back to what I talked about earlier. Like, I'm just now trying to feel normal again.
Wow.
And so like the idea of even quitting was just lost on me, because I was just trying to feel normal.
Yeah.
Like, I was just trying to like maintain. And so yeah, I think that's that part. And then when somebody's like authentically trying to quit, like, there may be mistakes. And I think when well-meaning family members sometimes can be super hard, like because like that journey out of addiction is hard. There are some people, and I've heard the stories that just like that, they quit and they never go back. They don't have relapses. I know the stories. Like, when I quit using meth, like when I finally quit, I've not touched it since. Like, but I also have friends and family that it wasn't that easy for them. There was this journey of this undoing this part of their life, and sometimes we can be well-meaning and like, well, why don't you just get it together? Why haven't you quit yet? You know, well, why did you relapse? You know? And sometimes people don't need that. Like, they just need to know, hey, like, I'm sorry you struggled. Like, I'm not happy with the fact that you struggled.
Sure.
But please tell me what's going on. I'm here for you.
Absolutely.
You know, and I
That's
think
good.
that part of it.
And just to know that they're loved.
Yeah.
You know, you made a mistake. I don't hate you for it. I love you. I want to help you. I mean,
Yeah.
And I don't think we have to excuse the behavior. Like, the behavior is bad.
Yeah.
But I think, like, meeting them with some understanding, like, I know that you're struggling, and so how can I help you on the backside of this bad choice?
don't hate the sinner, hate the sin. Don't hate the sinner.
That's good.
So I'm curious about this because I think that this could maybe be something that would be a little bit controversial, but we're talking about addiction, we're talking about substance abuse, but would you say that is it a decision or is it a disease? Because it seems like when you listen to the news, when maybe you're talking with some friends, that's like a hot button
for sure.
as to whether it is. Are you predisposed to it, or could you kind of both of y'all kind of like lighten us in on what your experience is?
I didn't have any family history of addiction. Like, so the predisposition or the genetics and all that, like, it wasn't there, like, in generations before me. And I made the choice to use. And so, like, my personal opinion, and, it got me in a little bit of trouble in some of the conversations that I've been in. Like, I just feel like it's a choice. I feel like it's a decision I made.
Yeah.
Now, I won't go as far to say that there aren't impacts on the body. I mean, that would be
100%.
foolish. There are things that happen to the brain that happen after the fact, and so, can it evolve into a medical condition? I mean, after the drugs do damage on the body, sure, but stepping into it, like, I just feel like it was a choice for me. And my opinion, based off of my personal experience, is that that I made the choice to use, and when it was time, with the help of Christ, I made the choice to quit. That's
Right.
I think that that's a good distinction because, we've talked about, the decisions that we make, they have positive or negative consequences.
Yeah.
And, sometimes when we choose to, cope with drugs or one of those things, I feel like it does start leading us down that path. We've kind of talked about that dichotomy of the spirit versus the flesh, right? And the further you run down one road or another, it seems like, there's more of that separation of what your life will look like. Here's your life with what God is, but here's your life on drugs or whatever sin thing. Like you said, everyone has their thing, but
I just rejected the idea of it becoming a disease for me because like I didn't want that to be my label and my identity, and I really didn't want to become a victim. To like I'm always going to be this addict. Like I'm not. And I deal with the same stuff every other Christian deals with. Like just living for Christ. It's hard. I mean, Christianity is hard at times.
Yeah, it is.
100%.
And so I really didn't want it to become a label for me in that regards,
Yeah, it makes
and
sense.
so I really pressed against that whole thing. That this was a choice that I made, and I'm choosing to walk out of it. I don't have to be there for the rest of my life.
Yeah, I love that.
It's almost like there's still, like, if it's a choice, there's hope.
There is, absolutely.
Like I was just I was reflecting back. I was talking with my wife Claire, and I was looking back on my high school times when I had experimented with drugs when I was 14, 15, and a little bit again in right at senior year or like beginning of college, right before I came to know who Jesus is. But it's crazy because I look back on all those friends, and more than I would say half of my people that I would call like my best friends are dead.
Wow.
And some of them, it's heroin. Others, it was meth, and a lot of them, it just started out as just like you were saying, like having a good time on a Friday, Saturday night, or okay, we're gonna go play some music, or we're going to this concert, and then, you go home and you're like, hey, how's so and so? Oh, well, you didn't hear, like they died, and we found them overdosed. Like, it's just crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would interject in this whole area of disease choice is that when somebody's making the decision to quit, like if we're helping them through that process, like we have to encourage them to get around a doctor for detox because that can be dangerous. And so I think sometimes we can just get gung-ho and just say, hey, go cold turkey.
Yeah.
And like watching somebody come off of heroin or even a long-term alcoholic, like they can die through the detox process.
Wow.
So
Okay.
we can't miss that,
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's,
Well, one of the things we touched on is you can't make anyone quit. They have to want to quit. So you talked about Teen Challenge, how some kids would come in or guys would come in and their parents would want them to quit. And so they'd bring them to Teen Challenge. And, You know,
Yeah.
I think that was a really good point too, is kind of when they're ready to quit, jump on it and just be, I know with my sister, she had to come to that conclusion too and be like, hey, I'm done. I have had enough. I'm sick of this. I'm sick of myself. I'm sick of lying and hiding it and being someone I'm not. And then when she wanted to help, just being there to love them and help them through. That's a great point. Medical help might be necessary.
And even a teen challenge, all the teen challenges require physical.
Okay.
So you've got to go to a doctor
Okay.
prior to coming, because you know there is a physical part
Yeah,
of
yeah.
this whole thing that has to be dealt with.
Wow.
Right.
But I mean, you're spot on about like making that jump when the individual is ready.
Yeah.
I mean, and you've seen that, right? The difference between those who were like eager for help and kind of there because they felt like they
Right.
had to be.
Yeah, we saw so many people just go, like they come to me like just not ready, and we can just see it on their faces, and they're like, oh, okay, they'll just leave, and they do leave the next day.
Wow.
But then someone will come, and I'm like, they're gonna get it, just because they're
Yeah.
so hungry for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
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 Awesome.
That's good. Justin, you said on Sunday some real encouraging things, and just kind of take us there, because you talked about the prodigal son. What are some of those things you brought out I thought were just so good?
So good.
Yeah. Well, I think when the prodigal son, he left. We know the story, right? Where the son tells dad, "I wish you were dead. I want your money. I'm leaving." And dad obliges for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I wasn't so lucky in my house. Like, I didn't leave with any money. And so, but the prodigal leaves, and dad just waits. Like this guy had enough money to give his son his inheritance before he's dead. So he was certainly, he was loaded. He certainly had cash.
Yeah.
And yet, rather than going after the son, rather than chasing him down, I love the position of the prodigal son's father. He just waits. And I really that's one of those stories. Did you ever read the Bible and wish there was just more to the story?
All the time.
And that's one of those stories where like I'd love to see somebody write a fictional account of what the prodigal son's father went through. Because I've seen it in parents of addicts where they're weeping, they're wondering where the son is, wondering where the daughter is. You can only imagine the bedside prayers that he prayed every single night, not knowing where his son was.
It's true.
But the dad stood at the gate. He stood. The Bible says when the prodigal returned, he was standing at the gate, and he just stood at the gate, held his house down, kept his spiritual house in order, took care of himself, so that when the son was ready to return, he was in the position that he needed to be able to offer real help.
Yeah.
And so I think when we're talking about family members struggling, we've got to be right. A lot of times offense can come up, we can get frustrated, and I think if it was me, I probably would have had a few choice words to say to the prodigal. Where were you? You never wrote. We never talked to each other. But yet the dad just threw his arms around him and welcomed him home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that's got to be our position with our loved ones.
Yes.
We stay connected to Jesus. A lot of times, a loved one's addiction will shake our faith. It really calls into question everything we know about Jesus when we see our kids struggling. And so we have to be sure to keep our faith certain in Christ, so that when the kid returns, we're there. We're ready to throw our arms around them and throw a party, right? To celebrate the return.
Yeah.
Not cast judgment, not be hard. Just throw a party and celebrate the return of the kid.
That's right.
Amen. That's
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah, that's the Father, heart of God right there. That's what we're called to do. That's good. This is great. There is freedom, and hope has a name. You said it on Sunday. His name is Jesus. It's good. So, thank you all for this real talk conversation about substance abuse and addictions.
So
It's
good.
good.
It's been good.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.